What's up, everybody? I'm really pumped about this conversation for multiple reasons, but I will start off by saying the number one question I get asked as a professional driver is how do you make it? How do you get into driving? How do you get into the sport? And quite honestly, I've answered that so many times in my career that I said, why not just make a three-part series where we talk about this subject? And so I will tell you a couple things. So first off, this first part, if you will, it's going to be a little bit about my story, why I know what you're going through. And even though we're going to have different experiences, you and I, as far as our stories and the chapter of life that you're probably in, or maybe the things that you're trying to overcome and your obstacles trying to get into the industry, they're going to be different than my obstacles were. But they're still going to show you a couple breadcrumbs. So this video and this series is not meant to give you all the answers. It would be impossible for anyone to give you all of the perfect answers. So if that's what you're looking for, don't watch these videos, quite honestly. You're just going to leave frustrated. If you're looking for me to just to lay out A, B, C, D, or give you the perfect formula on what to do to make it, that's not what these videos are going to give you, because those formulas don't exist. All right, they do not exist. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in just a minute. But save the time. If that's what you came on here for, save the time. All right. But I do want to talk about my story a little bit, tell you why I know what you're going through, and then talk about the breadcrumbs, if you will, some of the things that I've noticed in the sport of not just Monster Jam, but in the motorsports industry as a whole. Part two is going to be a little bit different. So I want to break down what I see from my perspective, the types of drivers out there. Because if you did end up making it as a Monster Jam driver or in the industry, you're going to notice that there's really two types of drivers. And there's a couple aspects and personality traits and all of that stuff that come along with these two different types. And I want to break that down in as much detail as I can give you. That part two is probably going to be the meat on the bone, so to speak. It's going to give you my opinion on what the future of the sport is going to need. And I say the sport being motorsports as a whole. And then part three, I do want to talk about realistic options and pathways for you to get started, and some really viable options to do that stuff with. Okay. So when I really thought about doing this, this series, the reason is because I remember sitting there in my room back at 21 years old and just thinking to myself, man, what in the heck am I going to do next? Like, I felt very lost. I felt like I was on an island too. Okay. I had just finished my Top Fuel licensing. And that hadn't worked, right? I was fighting with everything I had. I think if you know my story, I had 7 streams of income, everything from working at a car wash to doing soccer lessons to you name it. All of it was legal, by the way. But 7 streams of income falling into that dream. And then in 2011, the spring of 2011, is when I looked at my grandfather who owned our team. And even though I was footing the day-to-day bills and buying nitromethane for our Top Fuel car and all that stuff, he still owned the equipment and everything. And I was blessed that I had a grandfather that enabled me to do that. But I had 7 streams of income keeping that alive. And I went to him and I said, Grandpa, sell everything. I said, don't keep this just for me. I have a dream to do this. And if it takes me 40 years for me to get to where you are today, and I go into corporate America, and there I was 22, I guess, at the time. And I said, if it takes me 40 years and I don't get back in a race car until I'm 62, so be it. And that's what I did. So he said, okay, and he sold everything off and he cashed out, which he should have, right? I'm thankful that he did, especially that he was able to get some money back in 2011. But I remember sitting there at 22 going, crap, what in the heck am I going to do? I had left Campbell University. I got injured playing soccer. And so I left school, did not finish my degree there at Campbell. And so I came home and the Top Fuel stuff wasn't an option anymore. And I started looking around and I found a program. It was a motorsports program. It was at Winston-Salem State University. It's still in operation. There was a motorsports management degree. And I lived about 20 minutes from that school, and I thought, man, this is perfect. I can commute. And I was still planning, though, at that time to go work for a team. So even though I wasn't going to be able to drive anymore, I was going to go back to crewing. And that was my background. Since I was a kid. And then at 13 years old, I started crewing on our family top fuel dragster, right? So I was just going to go back to turning wrenches. And so I was looking at that motorsports management program and UTI. So UTI is the tech school that's based out of Charlotte. And I really could not decide which one I wanted to do, because there wasn't really, even though that motorsports management program was there, it wasn't a very large program, but they had the business side of motorsports. And I was drawn to that because of how many times I was sitting in a sponsorship meeting, right? Going, and thankfully that, I had enough companies that would at least take the time to meet with me to talk about potentially sponsoring me. And after rejection, after rejection, after rejection, I finally looked at it and said, man, I'm missing something on the business front of this. There's just not enough return on investment in motorsports that they are seeing. Otherwise, they would give me the money. It doesn't matter how much money you're asking for. If you can show the return on that investment, that people are going to be lining up to give you their money, right? They'll give you $3 million in a heartbeat. And that's what I was trying to land on the top fuel stuff at 22. If I could have shown them that that $3 million would have turned into new sales and new products or new employees, whatever their goal was as an organization, and they would have made $5 million by spending $3 million with us, that's a good return. And unfortunately, I think that the sport of motorsports as a whole, and even like groups like NASCAR and industries like NASCAR, they've had to get very creative over the last 10 years to where it's only the big teams that make it, because they can get more return off of 4 NASCAR teams than the one guy that's trying to come up through the sport that's trying to show the return. It's much harder if you're trying to break in and the only answer is to find a sponsor, which I also, by the way, I think that's what makes Monster Jam remarkable. That's why Monster Jam is so unique at giving people a shot, because, they're not asking people to bring sponsorship dollars coming in. It's already a big, beefy business. And that's remarkable. But anyway, we'll talk about that here in just a second. And so I went to visit Winston-Salem State University, and I saw everything. And the program was really small. It was only about, I think about 15 or 20 students at the time. And I decided against it. Actually, I tried to attend it, and that's a whole nother thing. Administratively, trying to get my stuff through the school, honestly, it was a nightmare. I ended up taking a semester off. I decided against the technical school, the UTI program, because at that point, I wasn't sure that I only wanted to drive. It was the business, the marketing side of motorsports that obviously I wasn't getting right, and I was missing something, and that's what I wanted to learn about. So I decided to go get a big boy job is what I did. So I went into corporate America, and I basically said to myself, I don't think that these degrees were going to get me to where I wanted to go right away. And so I just needed to try to make as much money as I could. And then maybe in 40 years, I could build it up to where I could, get back into driving professionally and legitimately. That's where my mindset was. So I went into corporate America. I was doing executive recruiting, and that's where I was placing CFOs and CEOs into private equity-backed organizations, and I loved it. And it's a very lucrative industry. And so my goal was to own my own practice, to build it up, and to make 7 figures a year. And then I've got the option. Maybe I don't. Thankfully, I found that. It kind of found me in a way. But I decided against the tech schools for that reason. I had already gotten my teeth kicked in on the business front. And to me, the only thing lacking wasn't my technical ability on the top fuel car. It wasn't my driving ability on the top fuel car. It was being able to land sponsorships. And it was being able to sit in a boardroom and be able to converse with a C-suite executive and handle the tough questions of, hey, why is this a good move for that brand to make? Okay. So that was a decision I made. But here's what I'll tell you. And when we talk about how you can make it, and why I said there's no formula is kind of hidden in what I was just saying. I believe that if someone got onto this video and they said, hey, Bryce, and they were thinking, oh, he's going to give us the person we should be emailing, right? Or he's going to give us the X, Y, and Z of how to turn this into getting up to Monster Jam University. Man, there is no formula. And the reason why that person is wanting that formula is because they're lazy. And so for me, it's not about being lazy. Again, I didn't care if it was going to be 40 years, take me 40 years to get back into the sport. I was willing to do whatever it took. And so my very first question to anybody is, are you looking for the formula because you're really trying to pursue your passion, or are you just wanting someone to give you something? Like, do you have your hand out? Most people that I meet, 99% of people that I meet, they've just simply got their hand out and they're waiting for someone to give them something, to give them that opportunity. They're sitting on their couch waiting on their phone to ring. And guys, that phone call may never come. I believe personally that it's more in the willingness to do whatever it takes. And that sounds almost a touch cheesy at times, like a touch motivational or inspirational guru, Tony Robbins or something like that. But I really do mean it. When I look at guys like, think about Too Tall. Think about Too Tall that's driving Velociraptor right now, and the guy's amazing. Well, he came up, and his goal was to always drive, and he was a technician for Monster Jam, and was doing a great job. And all of a sudden, he realized he wasn't going to get that shot to drive. Right or wrong, okay? It's not for us to say. Monster Jam is a big brand with specific goals. And some of the misconceptions about that, actually, let me finish my story about Too Tall here for a second. I love the fact that he said, you know what, he could have sat there and cried and complained and badmouthed why he wasn't getting a chance or this, that, and the other thing. And you know what? He went out and put his own dreams on his own shoulders, and he started crewing for, I think it was Jimmy Cretin was the first one he crewed for. And eventually he got the shot to drive. Because let me tell you something, the monster truck industry is that unique where if someone was wanting to drive, and a lot of, I got a lot of messages back off my Instagram, people saying, it seems like the only thing drivers ever say is to start helping out with an independent team and work your way up. But I could tell that it was sitting in a way where they didn't accept that answer that we always give. And can I tell you something? That's lazy. It's intellectually lazy for someone to think that that's dishonest, because that is your best bet at being a driver in a monster truck. It really is. To be able to go out there. But that's the problem is most people don't want to sweep floors. Most people don't want to grind it out. Most people just want the opportunity, want the formula to be given to them, and the formula doesn't exist. So Too Tall went out there. He started crewing for Jimmy Cretin. He probably took a pay cut, right? You think about, Monster Jam, being a technician with Monster Jam, there's a lot more security in that than going in and working with an independent for the most part. And there's a little bit more stability most of the time. I would think that it's actually tougher dealing with the big organization with Monster Jam. However, there's more stability in that stuff. And so Too Tall goes out there. He starts crewing with Jimmy Cretin. And then all of a sudden he got his chance to drive. And the guy has been incredible, right? I mean, we all like watching David Olford, right? Too Tall. We all like watching him go and compete because the stuff he does in the truck, you can tell he's been watching them as a crew guy for a really long time, that he understands how to apply that horsepower, right? So kudos to him. But there is no formula. There was no formula for Too Tall to go and execute on, and all of a sudden he became a driver. He went and figured it out. Right? Not everybody wants to be a driver, though. I think about Michael Garaffa. He's, I think I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He was a fan for years, showed up all the time with his dad. I remember meeting him. I think the first time I met him was at World Finals, and here he is, an AV manager for Monster Jam right now. Did he become a driver? I'm sure he had aspirations to eventually become a driver, and he might still. You never know what opportunities might pop up, but he's loving being an AV manager for Monster Jam. Right? And that's the kind of stuff that is so critically important, because he knows who he is. He knows what he's wanting to go and create with his dreams, and he's pursuing it. Right? And that's a totally different avenue for him to go down. And then you do have the Tyler Meningas of the world that pop out here. They get their chance. They grew up. But think about how he started. His phone didn't just ring randomly one day. That guy got a job at Digger's Dungeon. Right? He went in the hot sun doing driving the ride truck for Adam Anderson. And I don't know if he did it for a year, 2 years. I don't really remember how long he did it. But the point being, there wasn't anything that was above him. He was going to go and sweep the floors if he had to. Right? Coming up from rock crawling and his background around trucks, and he just wanted to be a part of the sport, and he had a dream and he had a passion, and he decided, you know what, I'm willing to grind and do whatever it takes. And then he got his shot. Then he got to go up to Paxton, and that was a whole process in and of itself. I watched that kid's first freestyle, and it wasn't very good. And here he is, one of the very best in the entire industry now at that. And so the way that he has just accelerated, no pun intended, through the sport of Monster Jam, it started with something that, Too Tall's story was different, right? Michael Garaffa's story was different. My story was completely different than Tyler's. Everybody's story is different. And so the misconceptions out there are those things like, oh, well, all they're hiring for is a specific race or a specific gender, or they have to, you got to have 200,000 followers on social media to get Monster Jam's attention. And by the way, I'm not a spokesperson for Monster Jam. I don't own the company. But here's what I'll tell you guys is intellectually lazy, again, to have that perspective. Are you wrong? No. But does that change? Yes. Here's what I'm talking about. Let's say that I saw the Sparkle Smash, the little unicorn diecast truck in the store. I think we ended up buying it for my daughter. And ever since I saw that Sparkle Smash unicorn truck, I thought, I cannot believe there's not a unicorn Monster Jam truck. Let's say that in 2024, let's say that they were trying to launch that, okay, or do some form of unicorn truck. And I think it's a great example to use because I think unicorns have kind of gone past their prime, just so to speak, on being relevant in culture these days. But if they were doing the unicorn Sparkle Smash truck next year, do you think that they're going to be trying to hire males or females for that truck? Probably a female driver, right? So as a company and as a brand who sets strategies to figure out what do fans want to see, what are fans going to buy tickets to come and watch, what merchandise will sell well so that we can keep money going back into the company and to afford to be able to run these Monster Jam trucks, they have to take that stuff into account. I've already seen, being in this company for 7 or 8 years, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of Monster Jam, but I can tell you this, I don't know what their prerogative, what their strategies are past 2023, and that may affect the types of drivers that they send up to Paxton. There is no cookie cutter pattern that I've seen in 8 years of doing it. I had 273 followers on Instagram when they called me. When I started my very first event, not even just going through that, none of y'all got on there and followed me when you saw my name pop up for Monster Mutt, did you? No, probably 5 of you did. And 273 followers on Instagram, and that was it. So it wasn't social media. And someone says, oh, it was because he could speak well. No, they didn't even invite me to World Finals my first year. When I drove Monster Mutt, I was not invited to even go and attend the World Finals that first year. So you tell me, well, oh, he's good on the microphone. I am now because I'm passionate about it, right? And we're going to get into that stuff in part 2. But some people say, oh, well, they're just good on the microphone. Who? Who do you think that they've hired in the last 6 years that was only brought on because they could speak on a microphone? I don't know of any. It's a total package, and that's what we're going to talk about again in part 2 is I think that there are kind of 5 key elements to drivers. And I think there's 2 types of drivers, but the right element, the good element, if you will, it comes with almost like a 5-tool player in baseball. And I want to talk and break down those 5 elements that I think make a great, great driver in the sport of not just Monster Jam, but all of motorsports. And so my challenge for you as we wrap up here on part 1 is I love that you're thinking outside the box. I love that you believe that there are pathways into motorsports, whether you've got a background driving something or not. Some of you are sitting there and you're like, I'm 19 years old and I've never driven anything like this in the past. And I think that's a little bit of a cop-out because there's a lot of drivers out there that they don't have a top fuel drag racing background like me or a stadium truck and trophy truck stuff like Todd LeDuc has, or wasn't born into it like the Andersons. There's a lot of drivers out there. Elvis Linez. Dude, I love that guy's story. I love Elvis's story. Armando Castro. Armando was sleeping in his car the night before the World Finals event when he first got the attention of Monster Jam. He was that passionate about it. And Adam Anderson had seen him coming around events for a number of years, and Armando was there with tears in his eyes and just, not even just asking for a shot to drive, but he was so passionate about everything that Adam Anderson was the one that got Armando's foot in the door. But Armando was willing to do whatever it took to break into the industry. Those are the stories that not only inspire me, but those are the stories that tend to make it, whether it's driving, whether it's some other form or some other thing that they're doing in the sport of Monster Jam or just motorsports in general. But there's a big aspect of that. And I think that people are sleeping on the concept of understanding the business side of motorsports and the business side of racing. Morgan Kane just left CarMax, and now he's a big senior manager over at Penske Racing. And can I tell you something? That guy is kicking butt, dealing with huge brands, with a huge race team. and he's kicking butt and taking names. Why? Because the guy has a brilliant business mind. That's what Morgan Kane and I always talk about. And when Morgan first introduced me to Monster Jam, by the way, it was in that 2011 year when I got out of drag racing. Morgan Kane said, you need to talk to Monster Jam. I said, okay. So I called a guy and named Mike Wells, who passed, I want to say it was 2016 is when Mike Wells passed away. And he said, Bryce, have you ever been to Monster Jam? I said, no, I've never even, I've seen one in person when they were at a drag racing event, and that was it. He said, well, you should probably go to an event and just see if you like it. I thought, well, that's pretty smart, Mike, right? So I went out and checked it out. And after the event, I said, man, it looks pretty cool. I don't know enough about the sport and the industry, but I'd be interested in going and testing a truck. And he said, well, Bryce, you're a male, and right now we're looking for more female drivers right now. We're looking for more minority drivers right now at this current stage, and that was in 2011, and I applauded them for that. I love the fact that we have a very diverse sport. And so he said, hey, you're kind of at the bottom of the folder. I said, man, that's totally fine. And that's when I went into corporate America. And 4 years later is when I got that call back from Monster Jam saying, hey, we've had your information all this time. Are you still interested in coming and testing a truck? And quite honestly, I think that they were at that point trying to ramp up Monster Jam University, and they were just trying to put some bodies up there and do that. I found the opportunity, I saw the opportunity, and I executed on it. I still didn't think it would turn into what it has turned into the last 8 years. I still had every intention in the world to stay in executive recruiting, to make a lot of money, and to eventually just start my own race team. That was my original goal. So that's for a whole nother story. But the point is part one is on this series is you've got to get it out of your head that there's a specific formula that no one's telling you. Okay, that is not something that exists, but there are breadcrumbs, and that's what we're going to talk about in part two. So if you're still willing to listen, I promise there's going to be some really good value here in part two. If you're still listening, all I can do is applaud you and let you know you're doing it right. I know that you're frustrated on days when you're like, man, I just don't see the way it's going to work out for me. And I promise I was there. But if you've got to do whatever it takes kind of attitude, and you're that passionate about the industry, and you're willing to go the distance, and you don't have a timestamp on your dream and what you're wanting to go and do, whether it's driving, whether it's just being in the industry, whether it's graphic design for the monster truck industry, man, there is a place for you. And the person that's just that's not willing to give up on those dreams, to me, that's the guy that inspires me. That's the girl that's going to find a way to break into the path and the career path that they've always wanted. All right. So if that's you, stick around for part two. I want to give you some really applicable things to think about, and I think some ways to prepare yourself on where the industry of racing and motorsports is going, so that when you do get your shot, when that phone call does come, you're not sitting on the couch doing nothing, waiting on your phone to ring. You're out there grinding, you're learning, you're growing as a human being and growing as a driver and growing as a personality and all those great things that are so important. Because when that phone does ring, right, and you do get that shot, my question is, are you going to be ready? All right? Part two is going to get you ready.